Let's turn to COVID. You're in China. There's COVID, and the outbreak of COVID in China has been big news here. It's undoubtedly had a big impact on you. Um, the U.S. just passed the million mark. 1 million human beings who died either from COVID or because they had COVID and some other so what's called comorbidity, meaning they were already in a vulnerable, weakened position. Maybe they were older. All of us know somebody, either family members or friends, who have died. And here you had China, where China had no advance warning, none. I mean, that's where the virus is first detected in Wuhan. Wuhan is locked down. Trump calls it the China virus over and over and over again. But, China was, because of its actions, because of its very proactive actions, which were condemned as a form of dictatorship and authoritarianism by all in the United States in the beginning. China had, even though it has 1.4 billion people, at least after the first year, maybe 4,000 or under 5,000 deaths, while we have 1 million. We have 1 million deaths in the United States. But anyway, COVID is in China right now. There's been an outbreak. The government has a zero COVID policy. What's it like in China? What's it like for you? And again, because you're there, and usually we're just reading headlines about what China is doing or what Chinese people think. We don't really know, but you are actually there. Let's just talk about it.
Sure. I think my experience moving back to China has been very much marked by the by COVID. I moved back here in March of 2020, so that's just the time when the world was entering pandemic period, and as China was starting to control and exit it. So I think I lived through actually pretty much 2 years of pretty privileged in the sense of not having to experience, the fear and trauma of death and dying and cases around me in a relatively normal life, aside from wearing masks at public transportation or doing tests that were relatively accessible and affordable in order to travel, for example. But I am also based in Shanghai. In the last 2 months, we've seen outbreaks not only here but in several cities. I know that most of the media have been focusing on Shanghai, but there's been a couple of dozen cities that have undergone some form of lockdown in the last few months. And of course, zero COVID policy. I think in the West, it's sort of now at this point there's an acceptance. I don't know, maybe of the death or the acceptability of death from COVID. Um, but at the same time, there's a interest in painting China's zero COVID policy as something quite dystopic or frightening. At the same time, I think it's important for you to bring up the deaths, because ultimately, what is zero COVID for? It's about reducing deaths. But at the same time, I think why I want to bring up that it's not only in Shanghai but in multiple cities is that there is a national policy that's been implemented in various cities in different ways. And it's important to analyze, why is it that Shanghai's supposedly 4-day lockdown has now entered its second month, and why there's been a lot of cases. It's also because the managements have been different in different cities. Shenzhen, that entered lockdown last month, of a city of 17 million people, acted quite decisively and quickly and locked out the city for about a week and returned pretty much to normal since then. I think Shanghai took a different approach, and it took on a slower approach. Actually, the own municipal government has come out to say, it erred in how slowly it reacted. It didn't predict how quickly Omicron would spread, and a variety of things. I mean, we could go into if it's interesting. But I wanted to sort of mention a few factors of why the zero COVID has been essential, and especially in a city like Shanghai. It has 25 million people officially living here. The numbers could be quite a bit larger with quite a temporary population as well. But it's a very old city in the sense that almost a quarter of the residents are over 60 years old. And in China, the vaccination rates of the elders has been quite low, even though the national vaccination rate is quite high. Almost 90% of Chinese people have received 2 doses. But the elders, for a variety of reasons, partly because there didn't seem to be a great need during the 2 years where there were no deaths and very few cases in the country to vaccinate the elders. There are some sort of maybe prejudices against the vaccine, especially for family members and elders who are worried that there'll be some, side effects from the vaccines. And maybe the program wasn't pushed enough for the elders. But in this city where I live in, um, a small percentage of people, about 20% of people who are above 80 have actually received the full doses or been boosted. So the reasons for this are really severe. It's to protect the human lives, particularly the lives of the elders. And I'll just point to one fact, and I think it helps us remember. Nature Journal just published a study that is quite astounding, studying basically the spread patterns of Omicron. And if China were to stop its zero COVID policy and allow Omicron to spread, they predicted it would result in 1.6 million deaths in the next 3 months.